Mr. President.
The senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise today to honor an extraordinary Texan and an incredibly dear friend. Karen Kaye Goolsby passed away on Monday, June 19th, 2023. Kaye is someone who's been an incredible friend to me for 2 decades now. She lived in Katy, Texas, married to the love of her life, Gary. Their son, Greg, born in 1981. She loved her family. She loved her grandkids. Kaye was a grassroots organizer unlike any other. Kaye was incredibly active in the Texas Federation of Republican Women and the National Federation of Republican Women. I still remember when I first met Kaye. It was 2004. It was at the Republican National Convention. And I was a 33-year-old young lawyer. I was serving as the Solicitor General of Texas. I had hopes to run for office. But I didn't know a whole lot of people in politics. And at that convention, I met Kaye Goolsby. She lit up any room she was in. She had a personality that was incandescent. And as Kaye would later observe, for some reason, this kid, that'd be me, just followed her everywhere she went. And at the end of the day, it wasn't complicated. Kaye knew everybody. And when I followed Kaye from one grassroots activist to another, Kaye would turn around and introduce me one after the other, say, have you met Ted? Have you met Ted? Have you met Ted? She had the energy of an atom bomb. It was unstoppable. Kaye became one of my very closest friends and most trusted advisors when I first launched a campaign for Attorney General of Texas. I remember sitting in Kaye's car for about 3 hours trying to convince her to come support our campaign, that I needed her. And she quite rightly said, are you out of your mind? You don't have the support, you don't have the money, you don't have the name ID. How on earth can you possibly win? My answer was, Kaye, with your support, we can do anything. After about 3 hours, her husband, Gary, who's also a dear friend, he told her, he said, Kaye, just say yes. He's going to keep asking you until you do. And she finally laughed and said yes. That race for Attorney General never ended up materializing. The vacancy we thought existed ended up not happening. But 2 years later, I launched a campaign for United States Senate, and Kaye was my grassroots chairman. I'll tell you, in that race, I was supposed to have no prayer. My opponent in that race was the incumbent lieutenant governor, who was personally worth $200 million, who had put $35 million of his own money in the race, and I'd never been elected to anything. Last thing I was elected to was the student council. But we had a weapon unlike anything else. We had Kaye Goolsby. You have to understand, Kaye would be on 3 cell phones at once, calling people relentlessly, and she'd greet them all the same way. She'd go, hey, sugar. And sugar, she could drag that second syllable out 3 sentences. And she'd be talking to people all over the state. Early on in the Senate campaign, we rolled out a list of Republican women leaders in TFRW across the state who'd endorsed my campaign. We rolled out a list, and it was like a cannon shot. It shocked everyone. That was 100% Kaye. That was Kaye on the phone with one after the other, saying, trust me, this kid, he's going to do what he said. After that, a few weeks later, we rolled out a second endorsement list with over 80 leaders of the Republican Women's Club all over the state. In response to that release, my opponent in that race fired his campaign manager. That's how big a deal it was. He had assumed that all the Republican women's clubs across the state would be with him, but he did not understand that when you had Kaye working the phones and working the phones and working the phones, and I would travel around with Kaye from event to event to event, and she couldn't be stopped. She'd take me to this person, to that person, to the next person. It was relentless. In 2016, when I ran for president, Kaye was my national Grassroots chairman. Kaye and I spent hundreds of hours on the bus together in Iowa, out on the ground in New Hampshire and South Carolina, all over the country. And I'll tell you, Kaye would talk to Republican women in every state. Mr. President, you're from the great state of Hawaii. I guarantee you, Kaye was on the phone with Republican women in the state of Hawaii. She had an energy that was fiery. And boy, she could get mad. Kaye's chewed me out probably more than my wife Heidi has. She would get mad at this or that or whatever you did, and she'd tell you exactly what she thought. I remember once Kaye was really mad at me. I don't even remember for what. But I had to drive all the way out to her house in Katy, Texas, sit in her living room, while she spent about an hour and a half explaining to me how I'd screwed something up she was mad at me for. She also made me eat some of her homemade brownies, which Kaye had a lot of wonderful gifts, but cooking was not one of them. And the brownies were pretty terrible, but I told Kaye they were delicious, and I appreciated it. And I took my medicine. Kaye and I, as we were talking to Republican women's groups, I used to say all the time that Republican women are the heart and soul. And when I say that, Kaye from the back of the room would call out, "And the brains!" And everyone would laugh, and I'd say, "And the brains of the Republican Party." It started off as an ad-lib joke, but it became something we said all over the state and eventually all over the country. Kaye had kidney disease and liver disease. She spent the last several months waiting on the list for a transplant. Kaye was a tiny lady. She needed a small liver. Several times, it looked like they were going to find a liver, a kidney. Just a few weeks ago, I got a text from Gary. It looks like we've got one. The surgery is tomorrow. That next morning, I woke up praying for Kaye until I got a text a couple hours later. Said the surgery fell through. The transplant wasn't a match. I've never known someone like Kaye Goolsby. Kaye loved this country. Loved it. She loved Texas. And she was so fierce and so full of love. When Kaye passed, I texted her husband, and I later put out on Twitter. I said, "The angels are weeping, and so am I. But I'll tell you this, I have no doubt that right now up in heaven, Kaye Goolsby is organizing and reorganizing everything. She's going to the angels saying, this isn't right. You need to change this. You need to move this over here. We can do better. After a long struggle with liver and kidney disease, Kaye's gone to be with the Lord. Those of us she left behind were hurting. We'll miss her. I'll still wonder when my phone rings if on the other end is going to be that lilting southern accent saying, hey, sugar. But we're going to have to wait a little while to hear it again. This is one of my favorite pictures. You can see the joy. She could laugh, and she brought that joy to everyone else. Her grandkids called her KK. My daughters called her KK too. To Kaye Goolsby, my dear, dear friend, the heart and soul, and the brains. We love you, Kaye. I yield the floor.